so the white race, being a created race, then how do we sync their history up with being a created people and then overpowering the people who were knowledgeable enough and powerful enough to create them?
My take on it, based on the mythology again, is it didn't really overpower them. If you've been on the earth for a couple of million years, and even Dr. Ben said that he gets more of a deterioration, a time just ran out, than he does someone coming and knocking us from the throne. Which means if you've been on the earth for millions of years, there has to be an intermission. We were weak from our infrastructure of being here thousands and thousands and millions of years. Physically, psychologically, and mentally. You see what I'm saying? Clearly, if the Africans were not weak psychologically and mentally, and the biggest the continent of Africa is, and all those Africans, they could have got together, crossed cultural lines, and stopped the European if they wanted to. We're talking about a small group of people. Here's the people that we say are so spiritually in tune. Why is it that they couldn't communicate with each other? We're talking about mass amount of black Africans in numbers that couldn't stop this thing. But in so many words, what we have is some type of catatonic state where these people were so old until the concept of even securing themselves based on a defense system didn't even register. And one of the reasons why it didn't register, because we had deteriorated to the point whereas we didn't look at each other in unity when it comes to color. The concept of color, if you're on a continent of Africa and everything you see is black all your life, the concept of color would not be the defining factor. It would be culture, language, customs, which in the case of deterioration, we had grown into too many of these cultures that saturated the central power. That meant that in these ancient civilizations, at the height of our power, those civilizations were vast. To have thousands of people under the same culture. As time went on, these civilizations started deteriorating, which creates smaller civilizations on down to tribes. So therefore, the smaller the civilization gets, the weaker it gets, because they don't have the central power of mass number under the organized culture. So as the civilizations get smaller, customs and culture become sectarian, different, multiple. The ways of communication breaks down. So when the outside invader comes in, there's no such thing as a central organization where you can even communicate on a mass level for a great defense system. Meanwhile, he comes in and pits these people against each other because these people have deteriorated enough down to really think that their culture suggests that they are a different race of people than the brother next door, which is the same thing. Now going back to mythology, mythology say that this would happen. They said that they would have to take an extract. You got all these thousands of cultures. This is very profound here. To try to understand what's going on. In so many words, what went on was not necessarily a fall. It was a divine plan. The ancient mystical masters that ran the earth understood that one day there would be a deterioration period which would separate mass populations of people who had a consensus of knowledge, information, and science under one cultural system, or 4 or 5 major cultural systems which were strong. And they understood that these systems would deteriorate and become multiple systems with fragmented cultures. So they understood that the central plan was to take those fragmented cultures, Egyptian, West African, Central African, extrapolate or extract the best, the strongest out of those cultures, remove them and put them all the way in the West. And then those cultures come together sexually on a procreation process that make a new creation. So those new creation, what would make that new creation a unifying factor that the African didn't have by deterioration? Because in us, there's something that's going on that the Africa is separated by. What do we mean by that? You got Igbo, Hausa, Dogon, Timbuktu, Egyptian, Cushite, Punt, Somali, Libyan, Nigerian, Ghanaian, Senegalese. Right. But over here, you create a new person that is mixed together of all these different Africans, because the simple fact, over here you were just a black person, so they just put you together and made it you. But in our blood system, we got Dogon, because we've been a great mixing bowl in the West that it talks about in the Kabbalah. Out of Eden I will call my son. These houses will come back into covenant, God's covenant, which is the tribes of Israel, Isis, Ra, and Elohim, which is Horus, being reunited. And when they come back together, in our blood, we will have Egyptian, Dogon, Hausa, Nigerian, ancient Yoruba, ancient Bambara, you know what I'm saying, the Fawn, the Dahomey, all in the central blood system, which is a reunited Africa of the ancient world, in the new people, because we are a mixture. Whereas the other Africa had broken apart and made other cultures. In us, we represent the uniting, the solidarity, and the merging back into those ancient cultures, which is called the smooth ashlar, or the crown jewel, or the finishing product. The ancient mystical Africans, recorded in the doggone mythology, we got so much of it, understood this. And that would become the body of Osiris, connected back together. You see?